And joining me now is South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator Graham, thank you very much for joining us in studio today. First of all, on this IDF strike that unfolded today at the Gaza refugee camp, the Israelis say that it killed a top Hamas general. Have you received any intelligence briefings to suggest that actually was the case, that they were able to take out that general?
No, I haven't. And, you know, the loss of life is tragic. A lot of innocent Palestinians are being killed. And the main reason is that Hamas uses their own people as human shields. So if you're Israel, you're in a dilemma here, because to go after their leaders, you're probably going to have to hurt some innocent people. But that's the nature of this war, I'm afraid.
I think that's obviously the big dilemma that Israel faces, that the whole world is really grappling with. What I just want to understand, though, is if this were the United States of America and there was a target that was in a densely populated civilian area, would the United States have taken a strike like that against a refugee camp?
I think a better analogy, what would the United States do to knock Japan out of the war? You got to understand, this is not normal stuff in the Mideast. Hamas wants to kill all the Jews. It's not about the Palestinians. They're not trying to help the Palestinian people. They're trying to destroy Israel. So when we were attacked by Japan, we declared war on Germany. And how did we end the war? We dropped a bomb on several cities in Japan, breaking the will of the Japanese people. If you had asked the average American what's the proportional response after Pearl Harbor, they would say the only response is victory.
Do you see why a lot of people, especially all these decades after that, would say we have other options here? I mean, this is not a time where our only weapons are dropping nuclear bombs. There's precision weaponry, there's intelligence. We have so much more information.
I don't know
so
why.
I guess what I'm wondering is, in 2023, when militaries as advanced as Israel's and as the United States have choices, is it acceptable to drop bombs on a densely populated civilian area where there are refugees, where people are living, where there are children?
Well, in 2023, who would imagine that someone who survived the Holocaust in World War II would be killed by Islamic terrorists in Israel later in life? In 2023, could anybody imagine a group of people would come into Israel and slaughter families, rape children in front of the parents, burn babies alive, put a baby in the oven? Can you imagine that? I can't imagine that. Here's what I imagine. The destruction of Hamas is non-negotiable. I hate the loss of innocent lives. The day after Hamas is destroyed, I hope we have a better life for the Palestinian people. But I'm not blaming Israel. I'm blaming Hamas. I'm not blaming Israel at all. I know they're trying to limit civilian casualties, and I know Hamas is trying to increase civilian casualties.
Is there a threshold for you, and do you think there should be one for the United States government, at which the U.S. would say, let's hold off for a second in terms of civilian casualties? Is there a point at which you would start to question?
If somebody asked us after World War II, is there a limit what you would do to make sure that Japan and Germany don't conquer the world? Is there any limit what Israel should do to the people who are trying to slaughter the Jews? The answer is no. There is no limit. But here's what you need to do. Be smart. Let's try to limit civilian casualties the best we can. Let's put humanitarian aid in areas that protect the innocent. I'm all for that. But this idea that Israel has to apologize for attacking Hamas, who's embedded with their own population, needs to stop. The goal is to destroy Hamas. Hamas is creating these casualties, not Israel.
I don't think anyone's asking, well, some people may be asking Israel to apologize, but that's not what I'm asking about. I think the question here is about how they carry out the war, and there are choices here. But you mentioned, and the Israelis have described it this way, they want to eradicate Hamas. And I think most people agree that that is a reasonable goal. However, how long do you think that will take? How long?
I don't know. Here's what I think.
Is it reasonable for that?
I think we ought to be focusing on the day after Hamas is destroyed, as well as destroying them.
Do you think that is on the table, that the Israelis are thinking about what happens after Hamas?
So I'm going to have dinner with the Saudis tomorrow night. This occupation of Gaza by Israel will not be long-lasting. Israel's not going to go in and occupy Gaza. That's a losing proposition. They're going to go in and dismantle Hamas. And when they've achieved that goal, The world needs to come up with a plan for Gaza and the West Bank to give the Palestinians something to live for.
How do you know when Hamas is dismantled?
When the Israelis tell me it is, because they live next door. I would never ask the Israelis to risk another attack from Hamas. I would never ask the Israeli people to shorten this operation until they believe they're safe. Now, once they believe Hamas is destroyed, then we need to work with the people in the region to give the Palestinians a better life. I'm not blaming every Palestinian for what happened. Every Palestinian's not a terrorist. There are Palestinian children caught up in this, and it does break my heart. I'd like to have a future for the Palestinian people that's more hopeful than they have today. Let's destroy Hamas, and that makes it better for the Palestinians and the Israelis.
I mean, the Palestinians, as you say, as a people, are not responsible for Hamas, but they are dying.
They
by
are dying,
the thousands. I mean, the number is well over 8,000 at this point. This attack today will raise it significantly. This is taking a real toll on a population that is almost half children.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are simply asking, should there be more time given for more humanitarian aid to come in, for more avenues of escape to be there for those innocents?
Well, let's move people to the south. Let's create
But should Israel pause to allow that to happen?
Well, I'll leave that up to Israel. You got to remember who you're dealing with. Hamas doesn't give a damn about the Palestinian people. Can we agree that Hamas is not trying to achieve a two-state solution? They're trying to kill all the Jews. They're trying to create an Islamic caliphate. They don't care about a better life for the Palestinians. If we can all agree with that, then let's eliminate them. And let's try to find a way to do that without hurting people who don't buy into what they're saying.
Does it worry you at all that, you know, as the Israelis have pointed out, Hamas is hiding amongst civilians in order to create a civilian catastrophe?
Right.
Does it worry you at all that these attacks actually play into that, first of all? And second of all, is potentially riling up the Muslim world in a way that could create even more terrorist activity around the globe? Does that worry you?
Yeah. What worries me the most is that we missed this and that Hamas was able to slaughter these people and nobody pick up the intel. How could we gotten it so wrong here and in Israel?
But the moral authority that the United States has, is there a risk that it could be lost in this war?
All I'm saying is that Israel needs to destroy Hamas. You've got to go in on the ground to do that. Let's try to lessen the loss of innocent life. But it's non-negotiable for the destruction of Hamas. You can't do it from the air. You have to get on the ground. They're embedded among the civilian population. And I will say this, do what you need as long as you need to do it from an Israeli point of view. Find out what happens when Hamas is destroyed. I'd like to learn from the past mistakes, create a better life for the Palestinians, and try to get Saudi Arabia and Israel back together. You know why I think this attack was created? To stop the reconciliation effort between Saudi Arabia and Israel by Iran. The real culprit here is Iran.
Yeah. Senator Graham, don't go anywhere. We have a lot more that we want to talk to you about. Coming up next, including the newly elected Speaker, Mike Johnson. He's picking his first fight with Senate Republicans and the White House over an Israel aid package. We'll have more on that in a moment. Is forming fast as the new speaker picks his first fight with the White House and the Senate by using war as a bargaining chip. The person who is 2 heartbeats away from the presidency is a man of mystery to most of the public and, frankly, to many of his own colleagues. But after weeks of infighting, Republicans rushed Mike Johnson into the speakership in just a matter of hours. And he's done 3 on-camera interviews since getting the House gavel, one with a Republican Party mouthpiece, another with a conspiracy peddler at the center of the Dominion lawsuit, and the third with Donald Trump's former press secretary. So here is what we've learned about Johnson since he became Speaker.
What does Mike Johnson think about any issue under the sun? I said, well, go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview. On the marriage issue, no one has discussed that for as long as I can remember. This has been settled by the Supreme Court. We argued my entire career for 25 years that the state should have the right to do this. There's no national consensus among the people on what to do with that issue on a federal level, for certain.
He's not convicted. He's charged.
Not convicted. He's charged. And so if we're going to expel people from Congress just because they're charged with a crime, then, or accused, that's a problem. The problem is the human heart. It's not guns. It's not the weapons. At the end of the day, we have to protect the right of the citizens to protect themselves. We have to base it upon the evidence, and the evidence is coming together. We'll see where it leads.
But perhaps the most notable revelation that we've learned about Johnson as Speaker is that he wants to move a standalone aid package for Israel without aid for Ukraine.
To put it succinctly, for our adversaries, be they states or non-states, this is all one fight. And we have to respond in a way that recognizes that. If we start to peel off pieces of this package, they'll see that, they'll understand that we are playing whack-a-mole.
But Johnson's plan is not as standalone as advertised. In order to pay for the Israel aid, Johnson actually wants to cut $14 billion from the IRS. Fewer agents, he says. It seems odd and really unrelated to link the IRS to emergency aid for Israel. Unless you watch enough right-wing media, the IRS is one of its favorite boogeymen. Democrats, though, call this disgraceful, a non-starter, offensive, a poison pill, problematic, and ridiculous. But politics aside, here is the reality. The $14 billion is part of an $80 billion investment designed to ensure that the ultra-wealthy and corporations don't skip out on paying their taxes. Tax enforcement is actually a big revenue driver for the government without raising taxes, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation. It's been popular with every president since Ronald Reagan. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, which is also nonpartisan, investing in this enforcement at the $80 billion level was estimated to actually raise $200 billion in revenue over the next decade. So if you hamper those efforts, it's possible that this would end up actually costing the U.S. even more in lost revenue beyond the sticker price. Now, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, also nonpartisan, defunding tax enforcement by $14 billion to pay for new spending, the House will actually add more than $30 billion to the debt. And back with me now is Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator Graham, there is a new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and he is now saying he wants to pay for Israel aid by slashing funding for the IRS. Senator Schumer, your colleague, says that's not a serious proposal. Senator McConnell has also said that he doesn't think that that's a good idea. So do you side with the top Democrat in the Senate or the top Republican in the House?
I side with Israel, and I want to get them as much money as they need as quick as they can get it. So to the House, I understand we need to start paying for things around here. I get that. But this is truly an emergency, and I don't think we've ever offset an emergency aid before. When we have a disaster, when there's a hurricane that hits South Carolina, we don't have pay-fors because it's an emergency. What I don't want to happen is that the support for Israel become partisan, right? I think there's probably 400 votes in the House to support Israel. Now, when you start putting things like pay-fors on the table, then you break that coalition apart.
So
that's what I worry about.
So you're saying Speaker Johnson is wrong?
Well, I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying the reality is that when it gets to the Senate, it's not going to go forward the way it's constructed. We just don't have 60 votes for this. So rather than focusing on having pay-fors that Republicans like and Democrats don't, why don't we agree with the idea that all of us need to support helping Israel now? He can do whatever he wants to in the House, but when it comes to the Senate, I promise you there are not 60 votes for this.
Do you believe that Ukraine aid and Israel aid should remain together?
Personally, I do.
And do you think that that will ultimately happen?
I think it will in the Senate. You know, if Putin gets away with invading Ukraine, there goes Taiwan. Putin hosted Hamas, I think, yesterday in Moscow. So all this is really interconnected to me.
Why don't your colleagues understand that?
Well, listen, because I say it doesn't mean, I'm just telling you what I think. There's a lot of people believe that Ukraine's not a good investment. I'm not one of them. There's a lot of people believe you can let Putin get away with invading Ukraine, it won't matter. I'm just not one of them. There's a lot of people want to vote on it separately, but I don't. Let me tell you why. It's in America's national security interest to get this right. We need to secure our border. We need to help Ukraine. We need to stand with our friends in Israel. We should all do it together, because if we don't get all three right, we're in trouble. If we don't secure a border, we're in trouble. If we let Putin get away with invading Ukraine, we're in trouble. And God knows if we don't help Israel, they're in trouble.
All right, I want to turn now to politics. The there is a presidential primary going on in your party. New CNN poll shows that Nikki Haley, someone you know very well, is in second place in South Carolina, both of your home states. It's followed by Ron DeSantis and then Tim Scott. Should the candidates at this stage, who are not at least polling in the double digits, think about getting out of this race?
Well, the last person they need to get advice from is me. I ran for president. I don't think I ever got 1%. I got out because I ran out of money. That will work. But Nikki's done a heck of a job, I think, articulating a foreign policy I agree with. Tim Scott's one of the most intriguing, talented people in the Republican Party. Now, why am I with Trump? I like both Nikki and Tim. I believe if Trump were president, none of this would be going on. If he gets to be president in 2025, this will end pretty quickly. Whether you like Trump or not, there was order in the world that's been lost.
Well, Trump just recently said that he thought Hezbollah was smart. I mean, should someone who said something like that be president of the United States?
Yeah, well, he killed Soleimani, and I don't think Hezbollah is smart. But
he said that.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, if he were president of the United States, Hamas would not have attacked Israel. I really believe that. Putin wouldn't invade in Ukraine because they're afraid of the guy. Nobody's afraid of Biden. A lot of people are afraid of Trump.
Senator Graham, do you think that Nikki Haley ultimately is the best alternative to Trump
I think
for
she's
Republicans?
Incredibly talented. If she won the nomination, I think she'd be a good president. I think Trump's going to win the primary in South Carolina and other places because most Republicans believed he was a good president for causes. He was a strong leader on national security. And I think most Republicans want him back in the White House.
One other point here. I mean, as you just mentioned earlier, Hamas is trying to stop a normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel that is being brokered by the Biden administration. They're doing this because the Biden administration is moving forward with basically an expansion of the Abraham Accords.
I got nothing but praise for the Biden administration.
Well, I mean, in that respect, how would Trump have acted differently?
Well, I think, the Abraham Accords came about because the Arabs believed he would stand up to Iran. The only reason the Arab nations followed his lead to normalize with Israel is because they felt that he was going to stand up to the common enemy, which is Iran.
But I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that Trump would have pursued a different policy toward normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel?
No, I think this is a natural extension. I want to compliment the Biden administration for building on what Trump did. I'm trying to work with the Biden administration to get an agreement between Saudi and Israel that would make the world more stable. Iran's biggest nightmare is that the Arab world join with the Israelis to move toward the light, away from the darkness. So I want to help Tony. I want to help President Biden in this endeavor because this is the right policy.
All right. Senator Lindsey Graham, good to have you here in the studio. Thanks for joining us.